Welcome to Medicamentum Authentica, authentic medicine with me, your host, Dr. Andrew Kaufman. Today I have a special guest, Clive de Carle. Welcome, Clive.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you very much for inviting me. Fabulous.
It's great to have you here. Now, Clive is an international speaker, and in 2019, I saw him speak at Acapulco, which was excellent. And he's also a health educator and practitioner. And he has a lot of expertise in vitamins, minerals, deficiencies, and especially in high-frequency electronic devices that have been used in medicine in the past. And there seems to be a little resurgence in this area, so we'll talk a little bit about that today. Now, Clive has a very interesting story of how he got into the healing space. I believe he suffered from a pretty intense illness early in his life and did not get much help from the medical system, as is often the case. And as a result, he started doing his own research and figuring out how to heal himself. And Clive, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that story today.
Well, for sure. I was working in ophthalmic optics when I made a mistake and I took an antibiotic. Just one course of one antibiotic for a trivial reason. I never should have taken it in the first place. And within a very short matter of days, my eyesight started going weird. It's fine now. And then I started getting arthritis. And I got arthritis so bad that I looked like I was 80 years old and I could no longer walk or get dressed or drive the car or anything. They shoved me in hospital, and at this point I got much worse. They thought maybe I had got a tropical disease, that I'd become type 1 diabetic. I was so ill, it was silly. I was in the observation ward for weeks, and they couldn't figure it out. I suggested that it might be from the antibiotics. Oh, no, it couldn't possibly be from the antibiotic. No way are we to blame. It's you. And anyway, they gave up. After a while, they were really nice. I mean, I have to say the doctors and nurses were really, really kind and lovely, but they couldn't help me. They offered me painkillers. Well, that's great, They suggested injecting gold into all my joints. That would be a good idea. Wow. That was at the time, 35 years ago.
Yeah, that's like a rheumatoid arthritis strategy, a very old one.
Exactly. That's what I'm very old, right? So... So basically, although I couldn't lift a book, I was too weak literally to lift a book, but I could turn the pages, and I figured it out for myself. I was low on magnesium, I was low on various things that basically, as you know, antibiotics, that means anti-life, and they'd given me 7 days of anti-life pills, and they'd virtually killed me, done exactly what antibiotics meant to do, So anyway, I fixed myself. All the arthritis went away. It's been 35 years now and no arthritis, I'm still type 1 diabetic, which is annoying. But I have discovered, obviously, as you know, that in 4 weeks, you can reverse type 2 diabetes in anybody pretty much.
Yes, absolutely. So were you able, though, to get your type 1 diabetes to a level where it's easy to manage?
I think I do as well as most other type 1 diabetics, which is... it's incredibly unpredictable. When I first started as a diabetic, I decided I'm going to test myself. And for a week, I ate exactly the same amount of food for every meal at the same time. My blood sugar was all over the place. And I realized then that actually my emotional state was having a profound effect on my blood sugar. So if I got upset or frightened or that type of emotion, my blood sugar would rocket up. And if I was calm, it stayed calmer. So,
well, it shouldn't be really that surprising because we know, right, that the mind and body are one thing, right? That mental experiences can change you physically, and physical experiences can change you mentally, right? But this is something that conventional medicine doesn't pay attention to at all. So it's not surprising that I'm hearing this for the first time, Clive, but I bet that that's something that other diabetics have also experienced. Have you heard that?
Yes, I have. And interestingly enough, over the 35 years, I've met several other type 1 diabetics who also had the same problem after taking an antibiotic.
Really?
So it appears that antibiotics, while occasionally, obviously, as you know, they can be useful, can be massively damaging. If I'd listened to the medical doctors back then, I'd be dead now. you know,
Right.
what they were
Well,
suggesting.
actually, Clive, I'm not entirely convinced personally through my research that antibiotics are really ever useful, but certainly you could if you were to make an argument that they are, it would only be in a life-threatening situation, right? Not a run-of-the-mill type of acute illness situation.
I've seen them work twice. Once I've mentioned to you already, where I was working with a medical doctor, and he said to to me, this person had multiple sclerosis, that it had to be a bacterial infection, something he'd caught off from the girlfriend. And I watched antibiotics, the biggest dose you can possibly imagine of really dangerous ones, actually reversed this guy's MS. So he went back to walking again. And then I was with, again, the doctor in India, and this man came to us whose face was so swollen, it was like having almost a second head. It was frightening. And 20 minutes, his face had gone almost back to normal with antibiotics. I don't know what would have happened to him otherwise.
Right. Well, I think that, our bodies can get in this situation where it's so overwhelmed with its detoxification pathways that the, saprophytes, the bacteria that we call upon to clean up the mess to help us heal, just there's too much of a burden that they get out of control and they can't complete the job, right? And this is probably what happened in those kind of situations, that the body was just completely overwhelmed. And by killing all those microbes and stopping them from making the substances that are causing the swelling and the symptoms, you just provide a reset, right? But it doesn't actually fix the underlying problem. So you still have to go back and do all the detoxification to keep that condition from coming back. Otherwise, it will express itself either in the same way again or in another way that could even be worse, right? So that's, I think, the utility in those kind of dire situations, right, where you're at a point where you can't do anything else and basically the person is at risk of complete demise, right? But that's not what they're used for in general, right? And also, if you look, at least in the United States, there's data about mortality from infectious disease, and it has not been reduced since antibiotics were invented. So if there is utility in certain situations like that, right, that's not how they are being used by the main system. So it's really unfortunate, and many people are suffering. I mean, I've had lots of clients come to me too that really their damage is from antibiotics. They're not able to figure out how to recover from that. But it is definitely possible, as you've shown yourself, right?
Oh, well, absolutely. But I'm very pleased you brought up the sort of, the power of the mind side of it, because one of the most dramatic results I've ever had was when I had 4 high-frequency devices that I'd just bought, and I'd linked them all together. So rather than just having one frequency device trying to heal somebody, I had 4. And I explained to this man who his problems were brain fog. He wasn't able to see properly, and he was in pain. So after the treatment, he was my happiest client. All the pain had gone, seeing brilliantly, brain fog gone. And as he was explaining it, I looked over and realized I'd forgotten to switch the machines on. It was entirely in his mind. And then just recently, I've been reading about the wonders of vitamin E for heart problems, and reading the work of the Shook brothers from the 1960s. And they were getting 85% success rate with placebos. 85%. So, I mean, I do believe that there are certain fundamental elements that we need, like without magnesium, without vitamin C, there are a few things that we have to have on that physical basis. But beyond those, I think our mind is incredible at, achieving reality, creating reality. What we believe appears to happen if you have enough respect for your body to make sure either you're eating brilliantly well, like our ancestors did, or you're using your intelligence to somehow supplement the lack of nutrition and then get the toxins out. Because the only reason, as you know, that anybody gets ill is physical damage, toxic poisoning, or nutrient deficiency. There is no other reason. course, a lot of people, toxic poisoning is emotional toxic poisoning.
Yes,
you never do well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I agree that those are the principal causes of illness. And, our medical system really plays a trick on us in terms of our own individual, psycho-spiritual power to overcome illness or restore our bodies to health by calling it, the placebo effect, and using things like, the white coat or the color of a pill or fancy packaging, right, to basically trick us into thinking that their drugs work when really they're just exploiting our placebo effect, and never tell us that we can actually harness this ourselves through our own power, through our own will, right? And this is a really, really empowering. I mean, the way we look at health, right, is that the person can change everything from within themselves, right? And that's an empowering paradigm, not a dependency paradigm. So, Clive, you had mentioned a couple of nutrients, and we had a preliminary discussion about magnesium, and I already started to learn some things, so we kind of cut that off so we could talk about it here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience with magnesium and what the significance of it is?
Well, yeah, magnesium really is the miracle mineral. If you had to narrow it down to one, it has to be magnesium. And magnesium is so wonderful because it allows relaxation on a cellular level. And, the type of health that I look at is if I can change one cell, then surely we can change all the cells. So I started looking at how can you change a cell in seconds? Why should it take weeks or months? So I started studying the work of various great people like Dr. Jerry Tennant, who explains the relationship between voltage and acid alkali of the body. And I began to understand how important magnesium is at the core of everything. Magnesium is at the core of chlorophyll in plants. It's, that green thing. And many people, of course, aren't getting enough green vegetables to start with. And then even if they are, because of modern farming methods, the soils are so depleted that there's not very much magnesium in the food anyway. And then about 12 years ago, I started studying cancer survivors. I wanted to know what they were doing right. And in the process of studying that, I found that I found this sort of journal from 1931 where a French medical doctor had just returned to Paris, spending 19 years in Egypt. He'd figured out why the Egyptians didn't appear to get cancer, hardly at all, compared to Europeans. But if an Egyptian went to Europe, then they got the high cancer rate like Europeans at that point. And it took him 19 years. He figured out it was the high magnesium in the soil naturally occurring in Egypt that was protecting everybody who was eating food from Egypt from cancer. Anyway, I had a client 2 weeks ago, and they were suicidally depressed. And they told me a snapshot of their life story, and I could see exactly why they were suicidally depressed. It was, oh my God, how have you survived this long? Horrible life. Anyway, I told her to take a lot of magnesium. I suggested not taking 1 or 2 capsules, but, and you've got to make sure you do this with the right type of magnesium, obviously. I told her to take 12 capsules in divided doses over the day. 48 hours later, she gets back in contact with me, no longer suicidal. She'd been suicidal for all her life, virtually. And she'd just been low on magnesium all her life. So give you a few other examples.
Wow. Well, so Clive, if I might interrupt for a second, because I want to make a distinction. So the 12 pills, like about how many milligrams is that?
Okay, so the average magnesium capsule, and I prefer capsules to pills because pills are glued together usually, and capsules at least are loose powder. The average capsules usually weigh in at something like 400 to 700 milligrams. Now, out of that, what really matters is how much pure elemental magnesium is bioavailable. So with the magnesium capsules that I manufacture, they are about 130 milligrams of elemental magnesium. So 12 would be the equivalent of maybe 1.5 grams or something. Now,
Okay.
Dr. Mercola, I believe, recommends that some people need up to 2 grams of magnesium a day. And I think that could well be true. But I was always hesitant in the past to recommend the dosage sizes that I do now.
Right. Well, Clive, that's why I brought this up, because like in mainstream medicine, right, they would sometimes check your magnesium level, right? Usually if you're an alcoholic or if you have kidney disease, like only unique circumstances, it's not a routine part of the standard blood chemistry. But if they were to replace it, if it was low according to that, they would give like 200 milligrams a day. So you're talking about giving like 5 to 10 times as much magnesium, right? So this is quite a big difference. And this could be why, like in the medical realm, that people don't seem to have a benefit from magnesium supplementation, right? It's really just like, oh, you're low, we need to give you some so that you don't have heart complications. Because if it gets really too low, you can have heart arrhythmias, right? But it seems like the numbers that they're saying are the normal range are really not what the range of health is.
Yes, they've got it wrong. And this is so true of many of the vitamins and minerals and amino acids and essential fats. Deliberately, over the years, they have scared everybody that too much selenium will kill you and too much vitamin C will damage your kidneys. And they've barraged what we now call fake news into the mainstream. And doctors, well, you can speak for doctors. I mean, presumably you were taught that probably more than 1 gram of vitamin C is expensive urine. You were probably not taught anything about magnesium, I suspect. Is that true, or did they?
Well, I mean, the only thing we're really taught about it is like basically what happens if it's too low or too high, right? What are the symptoms of that? And mostly it's like EKG findings, because it's cardiac symptoms, right? Because it's one of the electrolytes that the heart uses to carry out its electrical activity. So other than that, really, it was not brought up. I mean, I think we learned the metabolic pathways, a little bit, how it's a cofactor with thiamine and such, but not too much else. Oh, just
bear with me. I'm just going to plug in my computer. Sorry. I started becoming very interested in emergency medicine because, as you know, the job of the emergency room doctor is to save your life. Doesn't really matter how they do it, but their job is to save their life. So what do they do to stop a heart attack? They inject you with magnesium sulfate, right? That's what they do to stop a heart attack. So why aren't they teaching doctors that magnesium could stop a heart attack happening in the first place? Because if they did, where would all the patients be? They'd be alive, healthy, and not in hospital, not needing to see doctors. So,
and you know that you can't make money selling magnesium. I mean, you can, but not the kind of money that a pharmaceutical company makes, right? Not the kind of money that you can make doing a cardiac catheterization or bypass surgery, right? Where we're talking about $100,000 per patient, right? Maybe you could make $10 selling magnesium to someone.
Well, that's exactly right. And you start stacking them up. So magnesium is just magic from a heart perspective. What else is magic from a heart perspective? Well, vitamin E, just incredible. There are so many factors, vitamin C, vitamin D. You start adding them together. And what I've come to the conclusion of, there are about 10 major components that we all need for life that most of us are missing. When I first started a supplement company many years ago, we had 130 supplements at one point. Now I've narrowed it right down to about 11 because actually everybody's low on the same things, pretty much. Everybody's
it's
low.
like a broken record when clients come, isn't it? I have the same experience.
I will ask them my favorite questions and they go, how did you know? Right? Because it's everybody, right? Generally speaking, if they're over a certain age, different questions if you're young or over a certain age. But, the questions that I ask are things like, how much poison do you give yourself every day? And they go, what? And I say, well, how much of the food do you eat is organic? And they go, and I say, well, everything that's not organic is poisoned, obviously. You understand that. And I like to give the racehorse and the baby example. Have you heard that one? Where
No.
you're at home and there's a knock at the door, and suddenly somebody comes in with this racehorse into your living room, and they say, this racehorse is worth $60 million. It's really hungry. Would you mind feeding it? And he runs out the door and says, well, I'll be back. Then as he leaves, this woman comes in with a 9-month-old baby, says that the baby's eating solids now. It's really, really hungry. Please feed it. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Whoosh, she's gone as well. Now we've got a horse and a baby, right? So I might think, for instance, that mashed avocado might be really good for the baby, but for the horse, well, I don't know. How about oats? I'm not saying oats are healthy, but let's just imagine they are. We could agree that probably the baby would be all right on the oats and the horse would be all right. So how much poison shall we give the $60 million racehorse? How much poison shall we give the baby? And generally speaking, the answer would be none. Okay?
I would hope so.
I'll point out that these are figments of your imagination. There is no horse, there is no baby, but there is you and your family. How much poison do you want to give yourself? You had no question of not giving any to the baby or the horse, And so I like to start off with that, and then I'll ask them whether they've got the magnesium deficiency symptoms, like, are you getting muscle cramps in the backs of your legs or your feet? Do you get hiccups? Do you get anxiety or panic attacks? Are you sleeping really badly? Do you get heart arrhythmia? Are you constipated? Obviously, there are several other reasons that somebody might be constipated, but generally speaking, most people will answer yes to one of the magnesium symptom deficiencies. Twitches around the eyes sometimes. So then you can ask them the iodine deficiency questions. You've got dry skin. If you wore something tight around your neck, would you find that more uncomfortable than most people? Is your body hair thinning? Are your eyebrows thinning at the edges? Ever get dry skin on your elbows? Do you get cold hands and feet? Is your temperature out of control the other way? Are you a menopausal woman and getting any menopausal symptoms like hot flushes? Well, you can almost guarantee they're going to be low on iodine. Anybody with a thyroid problem, almost certainly low on iodine, is probably what caused the problem in the first place. And why did that happen? Well, as you know, it's things like fluoride, chloride, bromine in the bread is flour improver, knocking everybody's thyroids for 6, and then they're drinking water out of plastic bottles and doing even more damage.
Right. Plus, it's difficult to get enough dietary iodine unless you eat seafood or live on the coast. Right, for most people.
Yeah, exactly. And most of our ancestors, of course, used to live on the coast because while the ground is frozen solid, there's always fish in the sea.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're not by the sea, then everybody will have an iodine problem anyway. And the United States fixed it, didn't they, when the settlers were Midwest. They ran out of iodine. They're all getting giant goiters. Their throats, their thyroids were swelling up in the hope of catching more iodine from the air. And the American government mandated adding iodine to bread and salt. And the problem went away until, the 70s, when the pharmaceutical industry stopped them from mandating iodized salt and stuff. And they've now got, an epidemic. And 60% of women have got a thyroid problem in the States? I have no idea, I'm just guessing. But.
Right. Well, I think I agree that there's a large amount of thyroid deficiency, but the thyroid issue is a little bit more complicated because what I see is people getting misdiagnosed with the thyroid disease, and really they do have issues, right? They have symptoms, they have toxicity, they have leaky gut. Often I see that being confused, but what they're doing is that if the numbers are only slightly out of whack, they're just treating people with thyroid hormone. And you know what that does when people take the synthetic hormone? One thing is it's only one of several actual thyroid hormones. There's not just one hormone. There's a whole array of 4 or 5 of them. And when you take the synthetic one, you're only getting that one. And then also that totally turns off your body's own thyroid. Right? So it's like your thyroid stops working because you're taking that pill, and then it makes it one, harder to get off of it in the future, and then also it doesn't, function optimally because it's like the same dose every day, whereas your thyroid can adjust throughout the day, to meet your body's demands. So it's really, all of this stuff is highly problematic, and I wonder, if a big part of this is just iodine deficiency.
Well, according to Dr. Brownstein and Dr. Serkis and various people who have written the books on the subject, it certainly seems that at the beginning it was probably an iodine deficiency that knocked it out. Of course, it could be a selenium problem, or not enough amino acids could also play a part.
Well, I always recommend selenium and iodine supplementation when someone's trying to jumpstart their thyroid back into action, and a few other things, of course. But the iodine I usually recommend is from kelp. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the different preparations of iodine and what are the advantages and disadvantages?
Well, I generally recommend Lugol's iodine because it's been around for 150 years, and doctors 100 years ago, medical doctors, would have given doses so far in excess of what's currently taught that doctors should use that doctors would probably have a heart attack on the spot. Most of the natural iodine experts seem to believe that 50 milligrams, which doctors would freak out about because 50 micrograms is probably what they're used to, 50 milligrams for a short period of time, for a period of a few weeks, not every day, along with iodine and selenium, might rectify thyroid issues in 4, 6, 8 weeks. And that's what I've observed, even following Dr. Brownstein's protocol, getting remarkable results. And the words people use when they're getting the results, and this is super common, is they said, what happened was the brain fog lifted. And 4 weeks in, 6 weeks into the iodine, suddenly they could remember why they walked in the room, they could remember where they put the car keys, remember everybody's names, that kind of thing.
Wow, so it takes that long to replenish someone's iodine, you're saying 4 to 6
But it's hard to do it with kelp. If you were trying to, let's say somebody's on the floor low with it, trying to do it with kelp, they'd really need to eat a lot, like more kelp than most people might want to. But with Lugol's iodine, you could just take it once a week, but it's better to spread it out, I think, initially. It's not something you want to do long term. If somebody's not eating wild sea fish, if they're not eating any seaweed, they're not living by the coast, then maybe, Dr. Brownstein would say 12.5 milligrams would be the equivalent dose to that which the Japanese women take in seafood. I mean, it's super interesting. I mean, here in England, 9 out of 10 menopausal women get hot flushes. But in Japan, it's about 1 out of 10. And they're the ones who are not getting there. They don't like seaweed. It's huge. The whole iodine thing is massive. And, it protects you against the radioactive iodine that's coming out of Fukushima. Massively protective against breast cancer. As you know, in women, like men, the most iodine is in the thyroid, but in women, the second most iodine is in the breasts. Now, Japanese women don't get breast cancer the way English women do.
Right.
Could it be
unless they relocate to the West, then they have the same rates, right? Just like your other example.
Exactly. So
that it makes sense about the dosing because, like, one thing that medicine doesn't really take into account is that our bodies have this intelligence, right? And so if we're in a state that's deficient in something, then we can handle much larger amounts of it, right, than if we already have plenty of it. And then also our body has ways of managing these things, right? I mean, aside from a few things like fat-soluble vitamins that it's hard to eliminate, but all these minerals and vitamins, like if our body has too much, it's really easy to get rid of the excess before it would cause any problems. So I think the risk of going too high with these things is very low, unless, like you say, you do it for a prolonged period of time. But this is, meant to replenish you and get you back into a condition of health, and then you can go into a maintenance type of dosing, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And two good examples of self-regulating nutritional supplements are vitamin C and magnesium. With both of those, the way to approach vitamin C and magnesium is a little bit often. Because if you take too much magnesium orally or too much vitamin C orally at one go, you can end up with diarrhea in the bathroom, or as it's called in England, disaster trousers. So,
well, sometimes that's useful though, Clive, but...
Well, let me just digress and tell you a fabulous story. About 15 years ago, for the first time I ever recommended somebody, I recommended taking psyllium husks with bentonite clay with lots of water as like a bowel cleanse. Very first time I'd ever told anybody to do it, right? And this woman rings me up the next day, 28 years old, says, "You never guess what came out this morning." I said, "Tell me." So she said, "A small piece of yellow Lego." And she reckoned it must have been stuck there for at least 25 years because she didn't remember swallowing Lego recently. Anyway, so a good clear out can be a good thing. And so when I first discovered how powerful vitamin C was about 30 years ago. Somebody I knew, actually a friend of my dad's, who was a New York banker, he got cancer for the second time, and he was with my dad, and I was there, and he took me to one side and said, "I'm sorry to say this, but I got cancer for the second time, and, I'm not sure I can cope with it." Anyway, he didn't die for another 20 years. When he did die, it wasn't from cancer. What he did was, when he got back home to New York, he phoned up. We found Linus Pauling in the phone book. Rings the man up, like, he's won the Nobel Prize. So he says, "Well, I got cancer for the second time. What do I do?" Linus Pauling answered the phone and said, 35 grams of vitamin C in divided doses throughout the day. And when I next saw him, he told me the next part of the story. He said this was like 12 weeks later or whatever, and he was feeling good. Yet he'd refused the chemotherapy and he'd refused everything, so he's still feeling all right. And he's on his way to the office when he gets mugged by 6 guys on the streets of New York. He's on the way to a doctor's office. He said at that point, while he was doing the vitamin C, he still didn't believe completely that it was going to do the trick. He had a lot of faith, but, Anyway, so he's attacked by these 6 guys, and because he thinks he's going to die anyway at this point, he takes them all on. He explained he broke one of their fingers, and he keeps his money and the watch and everything, and they run off screaming, right? He gets to the doctor's office, and the doctor says, "Well, I don't know what you're doing, but all the cancer's gone." And he said, "I would have given them everything. Have the wallet. I'm cured if he'd known in advance." But,
wow. So not only did he cure his cancer, but he also got the strength to take on 6 men.
He didn't care, So,
wow.
A powerful guy. Anyway, so is 35 grams of vitamin C enough for somebody with cancer now? Well, it might be, but it might not be. I'm sure you've heard these figures. Some people have needed IV, intravenous vitamin C of 300 grams over a 24-hour period. They've been told, "You're going to die of cancer tomorrow." And they've convinced the hospital to do it. And usually it takes a lot of screaming and shouting and bullying and threats. But sometimes they will only give you a small amount of vitamin C intravenous, but that's often enough. But for people who can't afford intravenous vitamin C or liposomal or any of the many ways you can get it, just the regular ascorbic acid or sodium ascorbate, so long as it's the non-GMO type. That most of the vitamin C on the market is made from genetically modified vegetables and stuff, and you don't want that.
Right.
So as I say, I've got about 11 supplements on my website, and 2 of them are vitamin C. I've got ascorbic acid, which is the nicer tasting, more powerful one, and sodium ascorbate, which is the one for people who've got sensitive tummies. If somebody's got a sensitive stomach, then sodium ascorbate is basically ascorbic acid with bicarbonate of soda mixed in together.
Right. And so it's less sour.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But I've seen the most ridiculous results with vitamin C. I think you might have heard this story that Crow tells. I was on Crow's show, and I posted him some supplements which arrived while the interview was going on. His wife brought in the package, and he'd got a locked trigger finger. He was in a lot of pain with his finger, and his sister had it and had an operation, and that fixed it, supposedly. And he was booked to have the operation. So he took 2 of my magnesium capsules of the blend that I do, just 2, and I think it was 2. And within 40 minutes, the pain had stopped and his finger had straightened, and he decided to cancel the operation. I mean, what? You know, yeah, how is that possible? And why doesn't that result happen every time people take magnesium? Well, the reason is most of the magnesium in the shops, in the health food store, is basically compromised often in one way or another. It's perhaps the non-bio or very low bioavailable magnesium oxide version or something. So,
right.
You know, if you get the right powerful material that's natural and not messed about with, and then you take the right amount, well, the results can be super fast. So Crow took, just to clarify, Crow took magnesium and vitamin C together. 40 minutes later, bam, done.
That's amazing. And so just to go over, like, because I know some of the people are confused because there are so many forms of magnesium, but like the most bioavailable forms are when they're conjugated to an amino acid, right? So that would be like magnesium glycinate, magnesium threonate. There's another one that I think that you had a different formulation with an amino acid.
Yeah, well, I do an L-threonate all by itself, and the reason for that is that if somebody is depressed, threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier better than any other version. It seems to be really good from a happiness perspective. Then I do a blend of 4 of them, which is bisglycinate. Bisglycinate is probably my favorite. And then malate, magnesium taurate, and magnesium citrate. Now, anything with taurine in, taurate, for instance, is really good for the eyes. And one of the things that vegans need to understand is they're all low on taurine. So magnesium taurate would at least give them some of their taurine, the amino acid.
And taurine is a non-essential amino acid. It's not a typical amino acid that we talk about, but it is one that is biologically active.
Yeah. And so I'd like to talk a little bit, if I may, about amino acids, because they have their own incredible story. I mean, you know, pretty much everybody knows that weightlifters in the old days used to eat like 10 steaks a day or whatever, so they got masses of protein. But now they skip that stage and they take amino acids instead. And there are about 9 essential amino acids, which we just have to get from outside. You know, our bodies are such amazing factories, we can make almost any chemical, but the essential ones called essential, we have to get from outside. So I do a blend of the essentials plus a few others. And I first learned about amino acids really some years ago from a German medical doctor, and he explained to me that they were really good for reversing addiction. And I'd looked into this already, but he sort of confirmed this whole thing. And it turns out that about 30% of us humans are low on dopamine. We seem to be born with low dopamine levels. So if you have got that addictive personality, chances are you've got low dopamine. If you're checking your phone every 10 seconds like kids are, that's because they're getting a dopamine hit. If you're smoking or drinking or having a lot of sex or gambling or whatever, it's all a dopamine hit. So it turns out that amino acids can fix the dopamine levels in the brain. So about 4 years ago, something like that, I had this alcoholic come to me, and he explained to me, nobody's ever said this before, he said, look, I don't really need to eat food at all, because 4 bottles of white wine a day give me all the calories I need. But he was clearly dying. I mean, he could barely get out of the car, and he was in his late 40s or something. So I had 8 months' supply of amino acids on my shelf. And I said, look, I'm going to give you, these ones are capsules, now I use just pure powder, but they were capsules. I said, look, there's a month worth here, the 30 capsules, I want you to take 10 now. So he takes 10. And we talked for a couple of hours, and I suggest that eating food might be a really good idea. And I recommend the things I always recommend, you know, vitamin C and full vitamin minerals and magnesium and so on. and he goes away. He rings me up the following day and says he got home, and at that point he'd now taken 20. He poured himself a glass of white wine as pretty much the first thing he would do as normal. Didn't feel like it. Next day he ate 5 meals. No, I didn't think that was a terribly good idea after eating vegetables. Anyway, he was fine.
He had to make up for some.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, he'd given up the booze, right away.
In one day.
But he wanted to. This is obviously a key element. He wanted to. It's super important. Anyway, 8 days later, he rings me up. I've run out of amino acids. And my reorder hadn't arrived. I hadn't got any more. He goes back on the booze again. I give him amino acids again, off the booze. He repeats this about three or four more times, running out, not thinking ahead, back on the booze. And I spoke to him, I don't know, a year ago or something, and at that point, he was just taking a normal dose of amino acids, nothing extraordinary like I was suggesting. He just needs to do that for a few days to build up his dopamine levels so he could reassess his life and decide, well, he didn't want to be an alcoholic. He'd already made that decision, which helped. So amino acids are not just good for addiction. They do so many things. And I've got, with most of the supplements I talk about, I've tried to interview the experts on the subject. And so if you put my name onto YouTube with amino acids attached, you'd see interviews about it. Or the other thing that people can do is to, if they go to my website, they can join my secret health club. And a lot of what I would like to talk about in radio shows like this, I can't really, because they tend to kill you and silly things like that. So I started.
We certainly understand the censorship here on this channel, Clive.
Yes, quite. So as much to wind them up as anything, I started the Secret Health Club. And because, as you know, behind a club, you can do different things because society's rules don't apply to your society. Inside a club, you can say things, do things, write things, read things, which otherwise might be illegal outside. So I put together the Secret Health Club of all the information I'd like to tell people, but feel slightly concerned about doing. And so then what that became was this sort of repository of information, because I'm very rarely doing consultations anymore, so I just haven't got the time. I'd rather make videos and do a sort of mass market rather than just one person at a time. So I decided, well, if I put all the knowledge into the Secret Health Club that I'd like to tell them if only I had the time, if only, So I sort of did that. So yes, it costs money to join it, but it's not bad as a route to get some interesting information without having to, because all the information on YouTube, or used to be up until fairly recently, used to be able to find, but then the problem was there was so much of it. How did you choose? How do you know what was right? So I tried to narrow it down.
Well, it definitely, there's a lot of value to have this high quality information. And I imagine that it's to the degree that if you were to view this information, right, you'd be able to know how to take care of your own and your family's health issues.
Well, it's increasingly important that we're self-reliant, obviously. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. How many generations was it back that our ancestors were growing all their own food? They were totally reliant on their own means. If they cut themselves, hurt themselves, got ill from something, they had the medicine cabinet. And they had to be self-reliant because transport just wasn't there, and so on. How do you phone the doctor when phones haven't been invented yet? So I started getting very interested in the peak of that medicine. I was interested in the emergency room medicine and interested in, before the Rockefeller pharmaceutical complete takeover of the medical schools happened, what were they into at that point? And I started looking, obviously, at herbs and acupuncture and homeopathy and all those things. And I discovered in England, there were something like 20 homeopathic hospitals in England. Now, you don't get to be one hospital, let alone 20, if your system doesn't work.
Absolutely. And doesn't even the royal family work with homeopathic physicians?
Yeah, and the the Queen treats all her racehorses homeopathically, and racehorses not easy to fool racehorses with the whole placebo idea. So then I started, well, again, when I was working with this medical doctor, he introduced me to the work that they were doing over 100 years ago. And if you look at the pyramids, there are hieroglyphs in the pyramids where you can see that they're using electricity in various forms. There are some hieroglyphs where you can see it's like an electric eel, and they've got their patient with their feet in buckets of water with an electric eel in there. They're using electricity to heal people. And I started getting very interested in electricity, and I started reading old books. There were lots of cases, you probably heard about these, where people get struck by lightning, and they either die and they're a pair of smoking boots, or they're cured of everything that was ever wrong with them. Literally kill or cure. And I don't know whether there was a religious thing. I don't know whether it was big in America, but in England it was called John Wesley. There are Wesleyan chapels all over England. And John Wesley, in 1770 or something like that, was using electricity to heal his patients. And one of the most famous hospitals in England is Guy's Hospital in London. And they started their electrotherapy department in 1843, right? Way before drugs became the norm.
Right.
Electricity was normal. So,
well, Clive, we forget that we're actually electrical beings, right? We're generating electricity constantly in our body in many, many places, right? Our cells have to have a membrane potential. They're like little batteries, right? And we kind of ignore this except for like the EKG and the EEG, right? The brain waves and the heart wave test. But in actuality, right, our body is operating as an electrical device, a very complex one, right? So it's really shouldn't be that surprising that you can use electricity and electromagnetism to influence our physiology.
Well, absolutely. Dr. Jerry Tennant in the books Healing is Voltage, he describes the mechanism by which it works. And how he describes it is the cells of our body are primarily Tesla resonating circuits. So Tesla's idea was that you have a capacitor which stores up charge a bit like a battery, and you have a coil, and you discharge from the condenser or the capacitor into the coil. And if you can switch that discharge fast enough, then you can have a high frequency healing device. And so when Tesla was working in his lab at the end of, in the 1880s and very early 1890s, he observed something peculiar. He observed his staff all recovering from whatever illness they may have had, an ache or pain or whatever. And the only conclusion he could come to was that it was the high-frequency devices that he was using in his lab. So in 1891, he showed the plans and was in Europe, and he spoke to various scientists in Europe explaining how healing devices could be improved. There were already lots of them. Every hospital in the world by 1890 had healing the electrotherapy department, and they'd usually be healing you with batteries. That would be the way. And it was successful. Usually batteries work, So Tesla developed these two Tesla resonating circuit generators, and I'll show you one of them. This is called Diathermy. And every hospital in the world had these devices. And this is what you're looking at is an American device. And it works with spark gap generators. I'd switch it on, but unfortunately it would knock out the internet. And
it puts on like a fireworks show, doesn't it?
It puts on a really good fireworks show, and it looks quite scary. And as I say, every hospital in the world had these, and the doctors still use them today, but only for surgery. I've got so much equipment down here. Right here is an ophthalmic diathermy device, and why the surgeons love it is that if you use the sharpest scalpel in the world, it will still cut the flesh and create bleeding. But if you use cauterization using electricity, there's no bleeding. So for ophthalmic surgeons, they don't want any bleeding in the eye. That would be desperate. So diathermy is still used, but the surgeons using it don't realize that the diathermy machines have two uses. You can cut and burn with it, so to speak, but you can heal with it as well.
Right. So that would be like at a lower energy setting?
Absolutely.
Right, because this is, just for the viewers out there, what we're talking about is this device is the precursor to the modern electrocautery device used in surgery. And what it does is it actually burns the tissue with a metal electrode, right, that has a current that heats it up. And the burning of the tissue is what coagulates the blood and prevents the bleeding. But it's not exactly the nicest way to treat the body. And you actually smell the burning flesh when you do this procedure in the operating theater.
One of the worst experiences I ever had smell-wise was the first time I witnessed a neurosurgery operation. And because I sold the equipment for neurosurgeons at one point, I saw a lot of them. And the first thing you noticed was as they take like the angle grinder and cut through the skull, the smell of burning skull I will never forget. And then watching my friend, the neurosurgeon, say, well, you'll find this interesting, because I was into ophthalmic optics, right? And he takes the eyes out of the head and then drape down there. There's more room to operate. Yeah.
Wow. I've never seen that done, but that's quite incredible, Clive. I'm glad it wasn't me on the table.
No, well, quite. Yeah, you don't get a brain operation. But I developed incredible admiration for doctors, even though the doctors had more or less done their best to kill me. Yet this neurosurgeon that I worked with, he was incredible. He could work 3 shifts. In other words, the nurses in the surgery would come and go, and the next shift would come in, then the third, and he'd be working 24 hours later because, he said, I'm not going to let this person die. There are some doctors out there who are fantastic, but unfortunately, I can't say that for the majority.
Well, I know that certainly sounds heroic, but there's also lots of stories and observations about surgeons falling asleep while they're performing surgery. Right, so that valiant effort is sometimes in vain, but I agree. I mean, most of the people who are practicing medicine are good people at heart. They are trying to help, right? They just don't realize the bigger picture, and it's too difficult really to acknowledge that for them, because their livelihood would be threatened, right? Because with the knowledge I have, it's like I can no longer really allow myself to practice in that way, right? Because I realize that it's just doing harm to people, and I can help people, but only when I do things that are not part of the routine job of an MD, right? And now stepping outside of that, doing consultation work where I'm providing information, right? Then I don't have to worry about that. I can only provide the information that will really help the person, and not get involved in all of that toxic stuff. So using the diathermy therapeutically, so does it provide actually heat? Does it heat up the tissues? Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's exactly how it works. And back in the 1980s, the Spanish were reinventing diathermy, and they were still using Tesla coils and all the traditional materials. And at that point, they were able to get away with stuff. They teamed up with a couple of the biggest Spanish hospitals and were curing cancer with it, right? And then they got totally shut down, and now the same company still exists, but they have to call themselves beauty therapists. They can't make any claims about anything curative with diathermy. And so the history of diathermy is basically this, that radio came out, long wave radio, and the diathermy machine I showed you is long wave diathermy, and it interfered with radio. And because radio was everybody wanted radio more than they wanted diathermy. So they switched, all the diathermy manufacturers were told, you've got to switch to shortwave, which won't interfere with radio. And they did. They all stopped making long wave, all started making shortwave, and that was fine until the people started dying.
Right.
And they realized that actually shortwave was not a terribly good idea.
You can't get the same penetration.
No.
Of course.
And then they went to valve technology, then to transistor technology, and then to solid state. But none of it works like a Tesla coil, right? Long wave Tesla coils, that's what you want. So the Spanish brought it back out again. And, I have to be very careful what I say. So one of the reasons people join the Secret Health Club is to get the information that's there that I can't really speak about.
Right.
And
this device, right, it can target the heat to a specific anatomical location, right?
I can tell you, when I was working with a doctor, right, he had a patient with glioblastoma, which is pretty much, you might say, an unsurvivable brain cancer.
Yeah, this is a severe brain cancer. Exactly right.
And we saw 6 brain cancer clients that year, and 5 of them had their brain cancer on the right side where they held their mobile phone, and the other left-handed one had it on the left side. So, but diathermy isn't my prime tool now. Now I use some other devices. The device I was using was a Russian one. It's got somewhere on the desk. Here. I still use one of these, and these are very good because you can stick it in your pocket. I can usually get maybe 8 people out of 10 out of pain with one of these in a short time.
But that works on a different type of waveform?
Yeah, totally different. This is solid state. And the Russians, I got interested many years ago in the Russian secret soldier program. When it was still the Soviet Union, the Russian government gave infinite amounts of money to stop the Russian soldiers being injured in war. For instance, by the 80s, the Russian spies who'd been spying on the Americans had figured out that the Americans had a blinding laser, that they could fire a laser from a B-52, and everybody who had their eyes open on the battlefield would now have retinal damage and be essentially blind. And the Russians took this very seriously. So they had, I think, 130 scientists work on how to make a device that would reverse blindness.
Wow.
And they came up with various solutions, this device being one of them, and peptides being another. And vegans don't like this. They took peptides from the eyes of animals and gave them to human beings and were repairing eyesight. So,
wow, now that follows one of the principles that I learned from Jennifer Daniels, which is that if you have a problem in a certain body part, if you actually consume that body part from an animal, that it expedites the healing. And so it sounds like this is experimental evidence of that.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, obviously in the old days, before thyroid medicines and stuff, you would have gone to the butcher or the pharmacist who would have given you 1 grain or 2 grains or 3 grains, whatever it was, of dried thyroid from an animal.
And you can, by the way, you can still actually buy products like that that are desiccated cow thyroid glands, and that's what I would recommend if anyone actually needed to take thyroid hormone if their thyroid wasn't working. But absolutely, those are great examples.
Yes, and I mean, look at any carnivore. The head of the pack goes for what first? The liver.
Liver, yep. Absolutely.
So there are a couple of other things that I think are worth discussing in particular. One, I think, is charcoal. It strikes me that our ancestors used to sit around the fire breathing in charcoal dust, whether they liked it or not. It would have been on the food. And, for millennia, everybody's known that charcoal is a detoxifying, anti-poisoning strategy. I was mentioning earlier about the emergency room, the crash cart. What have they got there? Well, they might have bicarbonate of soda to stop a stroke, maybe reverse heart issues. They'll have magnesium chloride, as we discussed, again, for strokes or heart issues. They've got vitamin C and magnesium and charcoal, probably, for poisoning.
So I'll tell you that almost none of those things were in any crash cart I ever saw. They may have charcoal for poisoning, but that wouldn't be in a crash cart. They keep that separately, but I've never seen any of those vitamin C or anything like that in there. To be honest, they do have magnesium sulfate, right, because that's an antiarrhythmic. But it's really interesting. Mostly they have pharmaceutical drugs in those crash carts.
Well, yeah, they would. I mean, I'm probably describing the dream crash cart, something doing.
The Clive to Carle crash cart.
But bicarb is going to be there for sure, in an injectable form.
Yes.
So again, bicarb is a fascinating thing. I mean, I know I'm jumping about a bit, but...
Well, no, there's an Italian doctor who has a protocol with high-dose intravenous bicarbonate as a cancer treatment, right?
Yeah.
Because it alkalinizes the blood.
Yeah, Dr. Simoncini, the medical doctor I was working with 15 years ago, was spent a bit of time working with him, looking at his prospects. So bicarb is incredible and ludicrously cheap, obviously. But I mean, if let's say somebody's not eating well, their body is running very acidic, which is going to affect their body voltage and so on, and they don't want to change their diet, what one thing could they do that would cost about 1 cent a day or something? They could take half a teaspoonful of bicarbonate of soda in water before they go to bed. The last thing they do. That would keep them alkaline all night long. But if you wanted to be alkaline, it could be that all you're missing is magnesium. If you are eating lots of green leafy vegetables, for instance, getting magnesium that way, well, you're going to be running a nice, fine, electrically balanced, alkaline body. But if you're not eating enough green leafy vegetables, or if there's not enough magnesium, people just get ill from lack of magnesium. So over the last few years, I've had various testing devices, some of them quite expensive, electronic, light-sensitive devices, to measure magnesium levels, and everybody is low. Everybody, even the ones who are taking magnesium, in my opinion, they're pretty much all low because we're so stressed. Stress burns magnesium, and we're stressed by EMFs, we're stressed by everything. So, as I say, I started realizing if you put about 10 products together, most people get well because you put the essentials in, the essential vitamins, the essential fats, the essential amino acids. And generally, I try to advise people to do it with food wherever they can. But I found the 10 things on my website generally are the ones that pretty much everybody's low on.
Right.
And, we are self-repairing. All we got to do is put the right fuel in the tank, like our ancestors did.
Right. Well, I think, you mentioned the animals eating the liver first, right? I think you get almost all of those things from eating the liver. Right? Because those
absolutely. And in fact, Jennifer Daniels, I've known Jennifer for a lot of years, and I think the first time I interviewed her, maybe she said that she'd been vegan for an incredibly long period of time, and she couldn't get out of bed anymore. She was so weak, and she realized that her intuition told her liver, and she ate liver and was up and about in the afternoon.
Yep. That's quite incredible.
Vegans. I think vegans have got it tough. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know that they're going to likely get osteoporosis and stuff from lack of vitamin K2. They don't realize that their eyes are likely to suffer from lack of taurine. They don't realize that without B12, unless they're taking severe care to get enough B12 of the right type, they're going to have problems long term. All my friends, I've known so many people who've been vegans long term. Every long term vegan I know gave up.
I agree, Clive, and I don't want to put out any judgment against veganism because I think there is merit to it, and often I would talk about doing a vegan diet as a cleansing diet for a temporary period of time, but I've had the similar experience that people who are long-term vegans become deficient in a variety of things, and actually, even if I see people in person, I can often just tell by someone's complexion, and their facial structure and their skin if they're vegan, right? Because they have that certain look. They're depleted in collagen. They have that pastiness, to them. And but I think that actually you can sustain this in the long term if you just do some periodic replenishment, right? Like a few key supplements, and then do liver. Go through a period of time, where you eat liver 3 times a week, maybe for a month, and then stop, and then you can go the rest of the year without eating it until you get back to that point and replenish again. But I think it's really hard to keep going, purely vegan in the long term. You're definitely going to have consequences to that. And also, on the contrary, I've had a few people on the carnivore type diet, and they can do really, really well also, right? It's sort of the exact opposite diet, but over time they tend to get into some issues like parasite issues and other things like that, right? So they may benefit from doing a vegan diet periodically to cleanse. It's like, our needs are not just static for the rest of our life, right? The best nutrition that would serve us in our health at a particular time in our life will change depending on the circumstances, what we're going through, our behavior, how our lifestyle changes over time. And it's important to be flexible, I think, for optimal health and to listen to your body's needs over time.
Well, it's amazing how much the body can tell you if you know where to look and what to listen to. I had a client this morning, and I asked him to stick out his tongue. It was on Skype, and his tongue had these huge fissures down it. It was scalloped. And so it was obvious that he's going to be low on B12 and low on a few things. And so his tongue told me masses in 10 seconds. You can look at people's fingernails, just asking them questions. I mean, I don't bother with the testing anymore for vitamins and minerals. There's not much point. I can do it with asking questions. And you mentioned doctors and blood tests for magnesium. Well, the problem is that a blood test for magnesium doesn't tell you very much because that's not where it matters. It's intracellular level.
Right. Yeah, well, we forget that the blood test only tells us what's going on in the blood. It doesn't tell us what's going on in every other part of our body, right?
Well, quite so. I mean, I find it so amusing, what they must teach doctors in the 5 years or however long you spend. I mean, but they don't teach them like 1 or 2 basics, like what your brain is made of. Did they ever teach you what your brain is made of?
No, other than cells. But no, I had to learn later on that it's cholesterol.
Well, exactly. And I mean, every old person, more or less, has probably believed the eat low fat, eat low cholesterol diet, and they're now demented in an old people's home with Alzheimer's.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have this discussion with clients about the cholesterol, and some of them are even taking cholesterol-lowering medications, or their biggest concern is having high cholesterol. And I'm, and then I get on there and say, actually, you want your cholesterol to be higher. It's they're really surprised, but it's. If they told us as physicians that your brain is 90% of the dry weight of your brain is cholesterol, then that would conflict with what they then told us about that cholesterol causes heart disease and such, right? Because, those two things are quite at odds. And in fact, cholesterol doesn't cause any disease whatsoever. As you know, that whole thing was really a conspiracy between the food industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the government to basically sell us a story and make lots and lots of money when sugar became a cheap commodity because of high fructose corn syrup. Right, but it's still prevalent even among medical doctors when all this information has been disclosed through Freedom of Information Acts, right? That all the original science, like Ansel Keys' study, was completely bogus. And then you have all this other data that like World Health Organization studies showing that higher cholesterol is correlated with longer survival and such, but still they're prescribing cholesterol-lowering medications. It's quite amazing that the knowledge just is not spread to the average practitioner.
It is amazing. It's truly amazing. And I would suggest, and there are probably, 50 million Americans on statins right now, maybe? Or
I know it's one of the top selling drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, they make a lot of money. And so there's no, I don't know, it's, I've had to stop doing, I used to put on seminars and so on in the old days when you could actually meet people. And I used to put them on occasionally for doctors. And I've had doctors, medical doctors crying of the pressure. They've got this huge salary and the family are dependent on that lifestyle. And I say to them, you could there's nobody more valuable than a medical doctor who's got all that physiology training in theory, all that knowledge, that if only they could say, I'm going natural now, like Jennifer Daniels. I mean, she stopped completely with drugs. After just 1 year of being a doctor, she woke up and she got thrown out of America and had to go into hiding. Apart from that, put on the terrorist watch list.
Well, she wanted to meddle in some local politics. It was more than just natural medicine. But you're right. I mean, she's been a huge role model for me. And, I've made the similar transition. But, it's not easy. And that all the other doctors out there, they're just scared. And they also may not trust that natural healing works because they don't have the experience. It's like for me, and Dr. Daniels is kind of unique because she was skeptical from day one in medical school, right? And it took me a little bit longer. I still had faith. I had, I'd been a part of medicine and I saw a way to help people. And I saw that at least in cancer, that no one was being cured, right? But it was hard to step back out of the situation and see actually they're hastening people's death. Right? I didn't see that. And actually there are ways to cure those conditions that they're ignorant of. Right? I didn't see that right away. And it was a process for me, but we're in unique times, given this, pandemic situation, that this is a big wake up call. And, I know that there are lots of doctors who are confronted with the reality of this situation and the reality of medicine. And, I hope to see more and more of them shifting. And in fact, one of the things that I'm planning to do, Clive, is to basically create an educational program to retrain allopathic physicians into natural healing. And that's, I think it's a really, really important part of transitioning to our whole healthcare system to one that really helps people and is focused on recovery and health promotion and not this kind of sickness management model of, cut, burn, poison. And so I really, hope that there's going to be these physicians that are going to want to come and train in this, because they'll be amazed about the experience. Because the first time I ever worked with someone using this kind of protocol was the first time in my career that someone was cured from anxiety. And it was not difficult. It was a little bit challenging for me to figure out, being brand new to it on my own with no one to guide me. But once I got through that, I'm like, wow, this was so easy, right? We could easily be doing this all along. In fact, that person didn't even really need me. She could have learned this from a book and done it herself pretty easily. It's a totally different way of doing things, but people actually recover and get better and then have good lives afterwards, right? And that's why we all got into this in the first place. Right? And you can still make a decent living doing it this way too. It's like you're not going to be poor necessarily, right? It's going to be a struggle. You're going to have growing pains and all this stuff. And, I'm figuring it out myself now. I'm still pretty new in having this as my livelihood, but it can be done, and it's so much more rewarding. So I really do hope that there are more physicians, and if any are out there today listening to this, please, reach out and let us provide you with resources so that you can start learning about this, because this is the future.
So have you got an online course running, or what's the deal?
Not yet. I'm establishing things one thing at a time. I'm working on a movie right now also, so it's taking up a lot of time, but it's definitely in my future plans. I want to, I've traditionally been a teacher like yourself. I've even, I've taught in the mainstream medical school before, and I enjoy that. Like, it's pretty natural for me, and I want to basically provide that, to where it could do the most good. And I think, physicians, MDs, physician assistants, nurse practitioners who are trained in the Western system do have some advantages in this space because, like you said, all that understanding about physiology and science and anatomy provides a foundation. And then there has to be some unlearning of various, falsehoods, so that then you can relearn how to do things in a way such as to really support healing, just like you've been doing, teaching people and, working with people over the years to do.
So did they ever suggest at medical school the body was self-repairing?
Well, we all know that if you get a cut that you can heal. But beyond that, no. I mean, the suggestion is that for serious illness, right, that there's nothing you can do yourself, that you have to go, to us. You have to come to us, and we have the solution. So it's a very different way of thinking.
Yeah. I mean, the analogy is really like accountants. If you're a crook and you want to fiddle the books, you get somebody to doctor the books. Makes it look all right for a while, but it's actually a disaster.
Yes, exactly right. Well, Clive, I have to say it's been a real treat having you come and talk about all of this stuff, and I've learned quite a bit from you just during this brief hour or so. Can you tell the viewers where to find out more about you, how to join your club, and where they can purchase some of your supplements?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm sure you'll be putting a link in the description below that they can just click through to it. But I'm lucky. My website is just my name, which is Clive to Carle. And the UK government a few months ago stamped on me and said that I'm not allowed to tell you that my website, and they've banned me from using, I'll just do it anyway because I don't care. They've banned me from using the words C virus and various things I can't say. It's incredible. I think I'm the only person who's not allowed to say the C virus word in England right now. So I must be doing something right. But yeah, clivetocarle.com is how to find me, and you can join my Secret Health Club there, and you can buy the small number of supplements that I sell. And just if you do order the supplements, bear in mind that we've actually been swamped recently, and we're a little bit behind in shipping stuff out. So please don't expect it to arrive tomorrow, because I think we're 4 or 5 days or so delayed.
Have you had difficulty with any of your supplies or supply chain issues?
It's been a nightmare. It's been a nightmare.
I can imagine.
The sort of stuff that used to be commonplace. If I needed bottles or labels, or magnesium, I'll just order it and it would arrive. And now, a 12 weeks wait if you're lucky, And so it's been very difficult to expand the business, because if I do a radio show, then we get business and we get swamped, and my small staff complain. So trying to find the balance of not overselling.
Right. Well, at least it's the best kind of complaint, that they're too busy. There's too much work and too much revenue coming in. Right. So it's not the worst problem to have. But yes, everybody, it's important to be patient, because worldwide right now there are issues with supplies of all materials practically, and so we're all going to have to be a little bit more patient. But thankfully, Clive, you're still able to keep yourself in stock and fulfill all these orders, even if there's a slight inconvenience.
Yeah, exactly. And, I can't stress enough how important quality is when it comes to supplementation, because I think it's probably not exaggeration to say that maybe 95% of all the natural supplement companies out there actually are owned by the bad guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the problems I have because, of course I recommend certain supplements, for certain situations, right? So, and it is really important, and vitamin C and magnesium and fulvic minerals and charcoal are among the some of the most common things that I tell people about. But you're right, because all these companies, they use products that are not of the highest quality. They add all kinds of excipients and binders and other things in there that can cause harm. And also, they're changing their formulations all the time. So even if you find one product that seems to be good now, it might change in a couple of months. So having people like you, outside of the Amazon mainstream system, where you're a small operation, your focus is on high quality, right? You have used these products yourself, right? You know what you're talking about. It's a very different thing. So it's really great for me to have the opportunity to bring, this kind of quality product to the audience. And I do want to let everybody know that if you are signed up for my newsletter, shortly after this airs, you'll get a newsletter with some more information and a special discount for any of Clive's products. So if that's something you're interested in, please go and sign up. I do recommend the quality and can stand by that with Clive's supplements. So, it's good to feel comfortable about that, Clive.
Oh, great. There's one supplement I'd just like to mention very briefly, which is the latest one I've added, which is Selenium. And Dr. Mark Serkis turned me on to something called tongue oil. And it's an amazing selenium. And why selenium is so amazing is that along with amino acids, if most people are addicted, there's so many people who are addicted to stuff, whatever it might be, selenium has been proven to help people who are addicted, it doesn't matter whether it's crack or whatever, to detox. And the idea is that if somebody gives up a substance, that the problem then is they've got to deal with the toxin, the antitoxin that the body has made to deal with the crack or the heroin or whatever. And the selenium can neutralize your own body's antitoxins, therefore making withdrawal much, much easier.
Wow, that's really important for people to know. I haven't heard about that. So it can actually mitigate withdrawal symptoms. And then we all know that selenium also has anti-cancer or preventative cancer benefits as well. And of course, it's required for the thyroid gland. So there are many different uses for it. So thanks for mentioning that, Clive. Was there anything else you wanted to tell the audience before we wrap up?
Well, I mentioned the Secret Health Club a few times. If somebody's got an addiction, there is an addiction section with a number of articles and videos that more or less break down how to do it easily. I've been helping people get off substances for a long time. I used to use Iboga as sort of the route. I don't really know about Iboga.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that one.
Iboga is a root of a plant, and they give it to children in Africa as a rite of passage drug. Millions and millions of children from around the Congo sort of area take Iboga, and it's a week-long experience. It's called cracking open the head. And people who are heroin addicts, after they've taken Iboga, they have no desire for heroin at all. And it's become slightly dangerous because if they inject themselves with the same amount of heroin they took the day before, they'll overdose and die. Of
course, they lose their tolerance.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people make that mistake. It's really unfortunate. So is Iboga, is that analogous to an ayahuasca experience?
Yes, a little similar, probably a lot more powerful though. I took Iboga many years ago, and 20 years ago, and I had a 3.5 day long experience. And there are 4 alkaloids. The last day was spent at super speed, rapid speed, going through every mistake I'd ever made in my life. It took about 18 hours. My brain relived every piece of litter I'd ever dropped, every bad word I'd ever thought, every bad word I'd ever said, every bad thing. I had a total life review of the bad bits. It was horrendous.
Wow.
And but it was 3.5 days of relentless neurological activity, like you felt like you were being downloaded with information. And most people come out of the experience feeling like they've just gone through 20 years of psychotherapy, which is more or less what you have done. And most people feel fabulous, like they did when they were 5 years old with not a care in the world. That didn't happen to me. But it was a learning experience. Anyway, I'm not particularly necessarily recommending it, but I think now there are easier ways. That's what I was up to 20 years ago. Now, selenium, amino acids, fulvic minerals, and there are other ways to make life easy.
Absolutely. But it can always be a struggle, can it? Well, thank you so much, Clive, for coming today and talking about these things. I think it was a great way to spend the morning for me, and we'll have to have you come back again sometime.
Thanks, Andy. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks everyone for watching, and make sure to click the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.